The town of Halberton wasn't famous for anything. No wars, no celebrities, no stories to whisper through the generations. Just a sleepy little place where life moved in the same rhythm it had for decades. People grew up, got jobs, paid bills, and died in homes that looked exactly like the ones they were born in. But that all changed the day Emma Lee Maddox stepped into the courtroom. She was 9 years old, small for her age, pale, quiet, with eyes that didn't move too fast and lips that hadn't said a word in almost 3 months. Beside her walked Axel, a massive German shepherd with a jagged scar across his right side and a military K9 tag still swinging from his collar. He walked like a soldier, alert, precise, coiled with discipline, but his eyes never left Emma's. Not once. The bailiff had tried to stop him at the door. No dogs allowed, but the judge had leaned forward from the bench and simply said, "Let him in." Because everyone in that room, even the opposing counsel, had read the file. They knew what that dog had been through, what the girl had survived, what they were both walking into. And yet nobody really understood what was about to happen. No one, except Emma and Axel. 3 months earlier, Emma had lived in a different world, one with birthday balloons, school field trips, and a dad who taught her how to tie knots and whistle through her fingers. Her mother had died years ago. Her dad, Corporal Will Maddox, had been her everything. Until the knock on the door. Military police, dry mouths, stiff uniforms. Words like compromised, classified, and no survivors. But they were wrong. There had been 2 survivors, Emma and Axel. The official story was messy, deliberately so. A Black Ops mission gone wrong. A compound in another country, children being trafficked. Will Maddox had gone rogue, they said. Disobeyed direct orders, entered the compound alone. He died in the process. They found Emma locked inside a soundproof room and Axel guarding her body with his own. He hadn't let anyone touch her at first. Not the soldiers, not the medics, not even the therapists sent to gently coax her out of her silence. It was only when Emma placed her small hand on his neck and whispered something no one else could hear that Axel finally stood down. Emma hadn't spoken since. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just held Axel's leash with both hands and walked forward one step at a time. Until now. Now they were in a courtroom. Now everything was about to unravel. The courtroom was crowded. Press had been banned, but word always finds a way. Lawyers lined the benches. A federal prosecutor adjusted his tie every 30 seconds. The child welfare officer looked tired. The judge wore a tired compassion behind his glasses. Emma sat at the table next to her court-appointed guardian. Axel sat beneath her chair, his body still but his ears tuned like radar. The prosecutor stood. "We're here today to determine the best custodial outcome for Emma Lee Maddox," he began. "Given the absence of surviving next of kin, the Department of Child Services is seeking temporary protective placement in an approved foster care facility." The judge glanced at Emma. She didn't move. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "There are complications," he added, voice less steady now. "Namely, the child has refused all verbal communication. She's displayed signs of selective mutism, potential PTSD, and attachment to an animal that may or may not be emotionally stabilizing." Axel's ears twitched. "Objection," Emma's guardian said gently. "That dog saved her life. He's not a liability. He's the reason she's even in this courtroom today." The judge nodded. "Noted." And then he looked down at the little girl. "Emma," he said, voice lowering, "I know this is difficult. You've been through more than most adults ever face. But if you feel comfortable, anything you can tell us about what happened that day would help us understand what's best for you." Emma didn't blink, didn't flinch, but she moved her hand. Only slightly. It was a twitch of her fingers, a brief curl of her wrist, and then a pause. Axel stood, not aggressively, not fast, but with purpose. He walked into the center of the courtroom and sat. Everyone stared. Emma moved her hand again. Axel lifted one paw and placed it gently over his heart. The judge leaned forward. "What was that?" Emma's guardian swallowed hard. "She's giving commands," she whispered. The room froze. Axel moved again. This time he lay down on the floor and rolled onto his back, exposing his belly. A submission signal, a symbol of trust. Emma's fingers twitched once more, and Axel sat up, stiff, alert, ready. The guardian turned to the judge. "She's communicating with him. Nonverbal military hand signals, short-range silent cues. That dog was trained by her father, and now she's using the same system." The judge looked pale. "And he responds? Exactly, perfectly." Axel hadn't moved. He was waiting. The judge looked back at Emma. "Emma, I need to ask you a question. You don't have to speak, just signal." A pause. The courtroom held its breath. "Did your father disobey orders to save you?" Emma's fingers made a short, sharp twist. Axel stood, took 3 steps forward, and barked once. The judge blinked. "He did." Another signal. Axel barked again. Emma's guardian translated. "She's saying they left her behind. Her father went back alone. He wasn't rogue. He was rescuing her. He died trying." The prosecutor stepped back. I wasn't aware." The judge held up a hand. "I've heard enough." He looked at Emma, then Axel, then back at the courtroom. "We owe this girl more than a decision. We owe her the truth." Outside the courthouse, reporters stood behind barricades. They didn't know what had just happened. But inside, in a room where truth had been strangled by silence, a little girl had spoken louder than anyone else, with the only voice she had left. Her dog, her soldier, her witness, her best friend, and that was only the beginning. Emma didn't return to school after the hearing. She didn't go home either, because there was no home to go back to. The government had swept in just like they always did when stories got messy. The remains of Will Maddox's cabin were boxed, labeled, and filed under restricted assets. His name was cleared of wrongdoing, quietly, of course, in a closed-door session that Emma wasn't allowed to attend. The official report was amended, but the damage was done. The people who knew the truth were few, and they were silent. Emma was placed in temporary care with a retired military couple in their 60s, the Whitmores. A kind, calm household. They didn't ask too many questions. They understood broken things. They had a room ready, a porch swing, a small garden Emma never stepped into. Axel stayed with her, always. The Whitmores didn't try to separate them. When they watched TV, Axel was curled on the rug. When Emma slept, he was under the bed. When she woke up screaming at 3 a.m., he was already standing, watching the shadows, guarding her silence. She still didn't speak, but she began to write. One morning, Mrs. Whitmore found a notebook on the kitchen table. There was a single page filled with blocky, careful handwriting. He didn't go rogue. He followed a different chain of command. No one understood what that meant, at least not at first. but someone did. A week later, a package arrived at the Whitmore's house. No return address, no postage, just a thick envelope wrapped in brown tape with Emma's name handwritten in bold marker. Inside were photographs, documents, and a note that simply read, "The man who ordered the extraction now calls it treason." They buried the file. I didn't. Mrs. Whitmore didn't want to show Emma, but she didn't get the chance. Axel had already sniffed the envelope out and dropped it at Emma's feet. She opened it without hesitation. One photo showed a man in uniform, General Richard Halston. Another showed a satellite image of the compound. Circled in red ink, a building labeled Holding Room D. Emma stared at the photo for a long time. Then she circled a tiny window near the bottom of the building, the one without bars. That had been hers. The one her father found, the one they never mentioned in the reports. That night, Emma opened her notebook again. She wrote for hours, line after line. She paused only to look at Axel, who sat by the window still, silent. When she finished, she tore the page out and placed it in a blank envelope. No return address, no postage, just one word on the front. Truth. And then she waited. It didn't take long. 2 nights later, the front gate of the Whitmore's property creaked open at 1:12 a.m. Axel heard it first. He was already at the door by the time Emma sat up. Mrs. Whitmore was still asleep. Mr. Whitmore's snoring echoed down the hall. Outside, headlights flickered once. A black SUV. No license plate. Axel growled low. Emma didn't move. The doorbell didn't ring. But a voice called out, quiet, clipped. "Emma Maddox, come with us. This is federal business." Axel snarled. Emma stepped forward barefoot and opened the door just enough to see the figure on the porch. Black suit, no name tag. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Axel stepped through the gap like a loaded weapon, teeth bare, eyes locked. The man stepped back. Fast. "We don't want the dog. We want the files." Emma tilted her head, then raised her hand. 2 fingers. Twist, drop. Axel lunged. The man screamed, but Axel didn't bite. He tackled, hard enough to send the man rolling off the porch. Mrs. Whitmore woke to the sound of tires peeling out of gravel. When she ran to the front door, Emma was sitting on the steps barefoot, calm. Axel was beside her. A black envelope sat in her lap. Inside, a photo of her father in full uniform standing beside General Halston. Behind them, a whiteboard with the words, "Project Dark Witness." Mrs. Whitmore didn't ask. She just wrapped a blanket around Emma's shoulders. But Emma didn't shiver. She was already on fire. 2 days later, Emma and Axel were in court again. Not for custody this time. This time, they were being sued. By the United States Department of Defense. The official complaint read, "Unlawful possession of classified materials. Unauthorized communication with military personnel. Compromised civilian security." Emma didn't flinch when the judge read the charges. She sat still, Axel beside her. The courtroom was even more crowded this time, and this time, the press was allowed. Cameras, flashbulbs, whispered gasps. Emma wore a navy blue dress, clean sneakers, hair braided back. Axel wore nothing, but his presence was louder than any uniform. The prosecutor, a sharp-jawed man with 2 white teeth, began confidently. "This child is being manipulated. Her father acted against protocol, and now his daughter has been used as a symbol of martyrdom. She is in possession of stolen intelligence. And that dog, a former asset, has been conditioned to respond to nonverbal triggers. He is dangerous." Axel didn't move. Emma's guardian stood. You say dangerous, I say loyal. You say conditioned, I say trained. To protect a girl, the system failed. The prosecutor sneered. She doesn't even speak. Emma raised her hand. The room quieted. She signaled. Axel stood, and then Emma did something no one expected. She stepped into the center of the courtroom and raised both hands, one fist, one open palm. Axel barked once, then again. Emma turned to the judge and slowly, clearly, mouthed her first spoken words in months. He remembers the screams. The courtroom fell into silence. Emma walked back to her seat. Saturday, Axel laid down, and the judge finally understood. This wasn't about custody. It wasn't even about classified files. It was about erasing the people who remembered, the ones who couldn't be controlled, the ones who barked when others stayed quiet. The judge looked at the prosecutor and said, "Dismissed." The dismissal didn't end anything. It only pulled back the curtain. Emma became a name, not just a file in a drawer or a subject in an internal review. She was invited to interviews, podcasts, even morning talk shows. Every time her guardian declined. "She's not a story," the woman would say. "She's a survivor." But someone was watching. In a secure bunker 2 states away, General Richard Halston sat in front of 3 screens. One showed footage from the courtroom, Axel responding to hand signals. Another showed a document titled Project Dark Witness Experimental K9 Human Trauma Pairing. The third showed a photograph of Will Maddox holding baby Emma, and Axel, only a few months old, curled at his feet. "She's active," Halston said quietly, "and the dog's memory sync is holding." The man across from him, a tech advisor with a nervous twitch, adjusted his glasses. "We terminated the program after Maddox defected." Halston didn't blink. We buried it." The tech hesitated. "Sir, if they trigger the second layer—" "They won't," Halston cut in. "She doesn't know what she is. She thinks this is about her father." He leaned back. "But Axel knows." And with that, Halston gave the order. "Initiate recovery." 2 nights later, Emma was in the back of a government SUV. Not detained. Invited. They called it a debrief. She sat quietly, hands folded, Axel beside her. No leash, no commands. Just presence. The building they arrived at looked like a medical center. White walls, calm music, smiling faces. Emma didn't smile back. Axel didn't blink. A woman in a lab coat met them in the lobby. "Hi, Emma. I'm Dr. Leah Carrington. You don't have to speak. I know you prefer other ways of communicating." Emma tilted her head slightly. The woman led her down a hall. Each room they passed had one-way glass. Inside, cages, dogs, quiet, eyes vacant. Axel stiffened. Dr. Carrington smiled too tightly. "These are the decommissioned units," she said. "Retired K9s from various sectors." Emma stopped walking. She looked at Axel, then made a subtle motion. 2 fingers down, palm flat. Axel sat, but his ears twitched. Emma stepped closer to the glass and placed her hand on it. Inside the room, a dog, thin, shaking, suddenly looked up, locked eyes with her, and wagged its tail. She made another gesture. The dog mirrored it. Dr. Carrington went pale. "That's not possible," she whispered. Emma turned, wrote something on her notepad. "How many others?" Carrington said nothing. Emma tore the page off, folded it, and placed it in Carrington's hand. Then she turned around and walked out. Axel followed. That night, the Whitmore's home was surrounded. Unmarked cars, silent radios, a black van parked with its lights off. Emma was already awake. Axel was already at the window. She made one motion. Low, Firm. Guard. Axel moved to the hallway, his stance rigid. Mr. Whitmore stepped into the hall. "What's going on?" Emma placed a finger to her lips, then handed him a phone. On it, a single photo, General Halston, and under it, a name. Witness Class C, Memory Bridge Protocol. "Where did you get this?" Mr. Whitmore asked. Emma wrote one word. Axel. Outside, footsteps approached the porch. 3 agents, no visible weapons, but Axel growled, not from fear, from memory. He had heard these steps before, in that compound, that room. Emma stepped behind him and tapped once on his shoulder. He bolted, not out of rage, out of strategy. One by one, the agents were brought down. No bites, just force. By the time backup arrived, Emma and Axel were gone, left behind a USB drive taped to the mailbox. Inside, the full contents of Project Dark Witness. It began with a leak. The contents of the USB drive, the real contents, didn't hit the news. Not immediately. First, it landed in the inbox of a freelance journalist named Sophia Tran. She didn't trust it at first. Anonymous tip. Heavily redacted documents. Strange acronyms like Memory Bridge, Protocol Ghost Hound, and Neuro-Loyalty Conditioning. But the photos were real. Children, dogs, military trainers, and one face that connected everything, General Halston. Sophia ran her first article quietly, not on a major outlet, just a blog post. Project Dark Witness. Did the U.S. government train children and dogs to share memory syncs? It went viral in 5 hours, and in 12, it disappeared, deleted from every platform, flagged as misinformation. Sophia's personal accounts were locked. Her phone stopped working. Her building lost power. But the screenshots had already spread, and one of them, the one that hit the hardest, was of Axel. Labeled Unit 041-Alpha, synchronized with subject EM07, Maddox Emma. Response level, absolute. Emma saw the post from a library terminal. She didn't react. She simply took Axel's leash, stood up, and walked out into the world. Then, no longer just a witness. She was a warning, a storm. Within days, protests formed outside court buildings, animal training centers, and even the Pentagon. People held up signs. "We trust dogs more than generals." Axel remembered, and we won't forget. She didn't speak, but we heard her. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense issued a statement. There is no program known as Project Dark Witness. Any information suggesting otherwise is either fabricated or unauthorized. But no one believed them anymore. Because Axel didn't lie. Because Emma couldn't. And because every time a camera found them, Emma didn't flinch. She just raised her hand in silence. And Axel would sit beside her, alert, calm, ready. They were called to testify again, this time not in family court, but before a federal committee. It was supposed to be closed door. Emma refused. Her guardian argued. The judge hesitated. Emma wrote 2 sentences on a legal pad and passed it across the table. They trained me in the dark. Now let them hear me in the light. It became the title of every article the next day. The hearing room was packed. No one dared bar the cameras this time. Senators sat at a curved bench, papers in front of them. Some looked ashamed, others defensive. Emma sat at a small desk. Axel sat beside her. This time she wore a simple white shirt and blue jeans. No uniform, no suit, just a girl and a dog, and history balancing on their shoulders. The lead senator, a gray-haired man with a stiff voice, began carefully. "Ms. Maddox, do you understand the nature of this hearing?" Emma didn't speak. She nodded. "And are you prepared to answer questions regarding your alleged involvement with..." Experimental government programs? She looked at Axel. He didn't move. She lifted her hand. One movement. Simple. Axel stood and then sat back down. The senator stared. What does that mean? Emma picked up the microphone in front of her, and for the first time since her father died, she spoke clearly. It means I remember. The room froze. Another senator leaned forward. What do you remember, Emma? She took a deep breath. My dad wasn't crazy. He didn't go rogue. He was part of something that wanted me to forget what they did. She placed a folder on the desk. Inside this is everything they tried to erase. Axel didn't forget. He kept the memories they couldn't take from me. She turned to the crowd. You call it programming. I call it love. Axel thumped his tail once, softly. The room, so full of power, of rules, of silence, erupted into applause, not from the senators, from everyone else, security guards, journalists, victims watching from behind glass. And somewhere in the back, a little girl stood and saluted. Emma saw her and smiled. Halston watched the hearing from a private bunker beneath an unmarked facility. He didn't speak. He simply closed his laptop and picked up a phone. Terminate protocol. There was a pause on the line. But sir, the dog, not just the dog. He looked at the screen. At this point, it's her. He hung up. But he had waited too long, because by then Emma and Axel weren't hiding anymore, they were leading. The van pulled up at dawn. It didn't make a sound. No screeching tires, no flashing lights. Just 4 men in gray, no badges, no names, stepping out with slow, deliberate movements. Inside the house, Axel was already awake. He had been for hours. Emma hadn't slept. She sat by the window, eyes half closed, notebook in her lap. Axel lay with his head resting against her leg. His ears twitched once. Then twice. She nodded. They knew. These men weren't from the court, they weren't even from the government. They were from the places that existed between files and denial, where everything was authorized but nothing was admitted. The door burst open. Axel didn't growl. He moved. Straight for the first man. Low and fast. The intruder went down hard, breath knocked out of his lungs. But there were 3 more. Emma stood, eyes locked on the second man, who raised a tranquilizer gun. She shouted for the first time in days. No! The man fired. Axel jumped, not to dodge, to shield. The dart hit just behind his shoulder. He didn't stop. He kept fighting until the second dart took him down. Emma fell to her knees beside him. His breathing was shallow, his eyes fluttered. And she knew what they had done. Leave him, one of the men barked. Take the girl. 2 grabbed her arms. She didn't scream, she didn't struggle. She looked at Axel and made one final hand signal, a soft wave, the one her father had taught her when she was 5. Goodbye, for now. They dragged her out of the house. By the time they reached the van, a black SUV was already blocking the road. Sophia Tran stepped out, flanked by 2 senators and 3 camera crews. You're on federal property, one of the agents growled. And you, Sophia said, holding up her press badge, are assaulting a minor. The men hesitated. The cameras rolled. And Emma didn't look away. She walked to Sophia and whispered, "He's dying." They rushed back into the house. Axel hadn't moved. A vet was called. A medic, too. They worked for nearly 20 minutes. Emma sat on the floor, hands in her lap, saying nothing. When the vet looked up, eyes red, Emma already knew. Axel was gone. The room was silent. Sophia knelt beside Emma. "I'm so sorry." Emma turned to the cameras and stood. She walked toward them. hair unbrushed, socks mismatched, a child with no flag, no side, no uniform. But her voice was steady. They tried to erase him. She held up her notebook, but he remembered everything. She flipped to the final page, Axel's paw print. Next to it, the words, "He was the witness. I was just the echo." The screen went black, but the world didn't forget. Axel's story spread to every corner of the internet. People wrote his name on sidewalks, tattooed his paw print, wore it on pins and jackets, and in the courtroom where it all began, a bronze statue was placed, a German shepherd sitting tall, eyes forward, one paw over his heart. At the base, a single inscription: "He didn't speak, but he made the world listen." They said she was just a child, too quiet, too broken, too small to stand against a system designed to silence her. But she didn't need to shout, she didn't need to speak, because one dog remembered, and through him the truth found its way to the surface. Axel wasn't just a pet, he wasn't a soldier, he was the bridge between what was done in darkness and what needed to be seen in the light. They took his voice. They tried to take hers. But what they forgot is that loyalty leaves footprints that don't fade. And now, no matter how many files they shred, how many orders they erase, the world knows. Because one girl made a silent command, and her dog obeyed, right into history.